Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our What's Working webinar. This is Amy Etten. I'm the Vice President for Client Services at STEMconnector. The What's Working series was initially created to highlight our members' successful practices in building a diverse and sustainable STEM workforce. Today, we will hear from 3 members regarding their experiences adapting their corporate K-12 STEM education programming for a virtual environment. 3 housekeeping items before we get started. Please feel free to introduce yourself using the chat function. Include your name and your organization. Separately, if you have any questions, we will have time for Q&A after all the speakers present. So feel free to add any questions that you have using the Q&A feature. And finally, I want to let you know that a follow-up email with slides, a recording link, and contact information for the speakers will be sent next week in our follow-up. So let's get started. We're going to start today with our friends at Northwestern Mutual. The K-12 Tech Outreach Program, known as High Tech. Joining us today is Molly Schuld, the STEM Outreach Program Manager, and perhaps my favorite speaker on today's call, no offense to anyone else, is Tanya Mishra, a technology intern at Northwestern Mutual and a 2020 Minicamp graduate.
Thank you, Amy. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, hopefully y'all can see my slides. So as Amy mentioned, my name is Molly Schuld. I am the STEM Outreach Program Manager at Northwestern Mutual, and I'm here today to speak about our High Tech Minicamp. I just love that Amy got our name of our K-12 Tech Outreach Program correct there. That was fabulous. I'm going to kick things off with just a little overview of our program and how we adapted to virtual, and then I'll turn it over to Tanya Mishra, who's going to speak about her experience and have much more interesting insight than I. So before I dive in, I just want to share a little bit about what our High Tech Outreach Program is and does. This is our K-12 Tech Education Outreach Program focused on engaging students in Milwaukee area in what's possible with technology. In a normal year, you would come into Northwestern Mutual and see something like this, lots of smiles, curiosity from students, volunteers helping kids just experience what is possible with technology. But obviously this year has looked quite different, but despite that, we are still moving forward our high-tech programming. And at its core, although it's really fun and engaging, this programming is about talent. So you see here just a snapshot of a regional impact study that was done about the impact that technology has on our southeastern Wisconsin economy. And Northwestern Mutual is based in Milwaukee, so this is very relevant to us. And one number I want to point out here is this 31,000 job openings in technology in the next 5 years. This is a huge, huge number, and we have a gap to fill there, and I'm sure many of your regions are seeing the same. So as such, we're trying to start early with students because we know that students need to opt into technology degrees, tech studies at technical schools or universities for us to be able to bring them in the door as tech talent. And there's a huge gap here, as again, I'm sure many of your regions are seeing in terms of the number of students just even interested in going into computing related careers and degrees to get there. Specifically too, we see that there is a huge diversity gap. So our efforts are focused on engaging female students and students of color because A, we should, there's a huge gap and disparity there, but B, because we know that our teams will be better as a result if we have the diverse perspectives of students who are more representative of our ecosystem. So I could talk forever about all the ways that we are doing this. It's really energizing work, but I'm here today to speak about the Minicamp program. The Minicamp is our high school tech talent accelerator program that essentially brings high school students into our doors to get them early access to our company, upskilled in technology, and into careers at Northwestern Mutual as an end goal. In a normal year, you'd see cohorts of students like this in our building, but of course that didn't happen this summer. It is an annual summer program where we went virtual. However, the model for our program stayed pretty consistent, so I want to share that briefly with you. I will note that our students are invited to apply from a handful of partner schools, so this isn't an open invite program. but I'm hoping by sharing the model and some of our learnings, it might spark something for your organizations to replicate as well. So this is the model that we utilize each summer, and it's been refined over the past 5 years. So we've gotten it down to pretty much a science at this point. For the first half of the summer, we pay students to learn. That's the Minicamp portion of the summer. Students are essentially taken through an immersive boot camp where they're learning technical skills, they're learning professional skills. And prior to that, as you can see, we have pre-work. And that's really important because we take students regardless of technical backgrounds. We want to make sure students have the opportunity to level set before they engage in the immersive boot camp portion of the mini camp. Students then have the opportunity toward the end of the mini camp, about halfway through the summer, to apply for internship opportunities throughout our company and different technical teams. That's not a guarantee, so it's really important that students step up, learn what they need to in the first half of the summer so that they can get hired on to those internships. So in order to do this, we rely completely on volunteers. I'm not a technologist by trade, I'm previously an educator. And as such, we need to activate the experts in this content area to actually develop the curriculum, deliver the curriculum. And it's really great because the program's all about developing our future talent, but in the process, our volunteers are actually developing their own communication skills, people leadership, and so on. And so clearly you can probably tell I'm passionate about this program, and that's because of the success we've seen. I've put a few highlights of Minicamp graduates quotes from the past few years up here, and I've bolded some of my favorite parts. So Angela here said, after the Minicamp, she emailed her counselor right away saying, I want to join the computer science class offered by our school. I want to make time for that, which is obviously a first step to get to a degree in college and then a technical degree or career, excuse me. Vid Youth here said he just wants to go to college so he can learn more and come back to Northwestern Mutual and help us grow our company, which I thought was a lot of clarity for a high school student. And then last but certainly not least, Haley said that she wouldn't have felt comfortable coming into Northwestern Mutual without this program. And I love that quote because Haley's actually still at Northwestern Mutual, still as a high school student interning, but she ended up helping lead the Minicamp program this year as an instructor. And the results of our Minicamp are beyond these anecdotal, although powerful quotes. So we've seen all of the students in the past 5 years who've gone through the program, including this year virtually, increase their foundational coding skills. We've seen their employability go up as recognized by our state's Department of Public Instruction certificate. We've seen about 40%, a little over, of our students come back to Northwestern Mutual in some capacity. So going on to our college internship program or another opportunity in tech. And then last but not least, we've already had 4 of the students come back as full-time employees. And again, this is a high school program that's only been running for 5 years. So pretty exciting to see that. So when this summer came up and we started to think about what our 2020 minicamp would look like, it was never a question of, will we deliver the minicamp despite COVID-19 and all of the resulting challenges? Our question was, how would we do it virtually? Never a question of if. And I will be honest, it was challenging, probably more challenging than we thought it would be, but equally as worthwhile. So in order to get there, we started planning really early. Like we'd already started planning for the program probably around January, February. In March, when we started to realize we'd go virtual, we dove in completely and we were delivering this program by June. And the first step we took was we made sure we had volunteers who were willing to do this virtually because we knew there'd be added challenges with that. And we actually recruited more volunteers than ever, which was really important for breakout rooms and different components of the minicamp. We also tested and vetted different virtual video conferencing platforms to find the best one for the features that we needed. We ended up using Ring Central, very similar to Zoom, but we went through quite a vetting process there. We took into account legal considerations, meeting with our law department, making sure that we knew best practices, policies with engaging with minors in a virtual setting, even things like mailing equipment to their home addresses, all of that we wanted to make sure we vetted and were prepared for. Once we'd gotten kind of the foundation set, we then reached out to the students who had applied and been selected, and we did a needs assessment to understand what their situations were like in terms of Wi-Fi availability at home, having a safe, uninterrupted space to work, and so on. And we accommodated different needs of students accordingly. We then sent out equipment to students, so laptops, different things they need to actually be able to participate in the minicamp. And as much as possible, we made sure that the software they would need was downloaded ahead of time so that there would be less issues, since it's a little trickier to troubleshoot when we're all at our own homes. We set some expectations, making sure we level set how we wanted students and our volunteers to show up, even developing things like a tech crashing policy, so if students ran into issues, there wouldn't be panic or concern. And then last but not least, we met a lot, to be honest, with our volunteers, our core planning team, because we knew we had to take into consideration different things like how would we do checks for understanding in a virtual setting? How do we build in icebreakers every day? Because students can't just like step into the hall to play ping pong or bags. We really had to build that culture virtually. So it was a heavy lift. And on the first day, for about the first 30 minutes or more, we couldn't hear each other. So that was a little panicky, like all of our planning, all of our preparation, and we literally couldn't hear anything on this Ring Central call. But this picture was taken at the end of day one, and I just love it because somehow we managed to be all smiles by the end. And the summer really was a success when we look at our stats, such as the fact that all of our students, which has never happened before, all of them ended up getting internships, and more students than ever are still working with us after the summer. But rather than me speaking about why I think it was a success, I've asked Tanya to speak a little bit about her experience as a 2020 Minicamp graduate, and hopefully to give us some candid feedback on what went well, what didn't, and how she's using her experience. So Tanya, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Molly. So, hello everyone. My name is Tanya Mishra, and I'm a junior at Brookfield Central High School, which is a suburb of Milwaukee. And this past summer, I attended the high-tech minicamp virtually, and I had an amazing experience. So, the virtual format was new to all of us, and as can be expected, there were some ups and downs to the format. So first off, I'll start with some highlights. So one thing that went really well was the use of breakout rooms. During the lessons, it really helped me and the other mini campers to work in small groups on practice problems after we learn about a new concept. Also, all of the mini campers were paired with a buddy or mentor at Northwestern Mutual. For me specifically, this helped so much because I was paired with someone who went to college at MSOE, which is a university nearby, and then interned at Northwestern Mutual before becoming an employee. So it turned out we had a lot in common, and she was able to give me really great advice on high school courses, college, internships, and so much more. She was also there to answer any questions I had about the technical aspect of the minicamp. Another important aspect was the constant motivation and encouragement the instructors showed us by sending like small care packages with things like a t-shirt, we got stickers, notebook, pens, and so much more, which was just a really thoughtful addition that kind of made things a little more fun. And speaking of fun things, another thing that the instructors really excelled at was adding fun brain breaks between the heavy learning. So we had a really fun time building Lego ducks, as you can see in the picture here, without instructions, just to see how everyone is creative in their own unique way. We also had weekly Kahoots, and those got pretty competitive, which just made it even more fun. Now I'm sure you're probably wondering whether us students were actually able to connect with each other in a virtual environment, and I think we actually did this pretty well. We created a student-only Slack channel where we could ask each other questions and kind of get to know each other better. And even after the minicamp ended and we were all in our own internships, we would sometimes have lunch calls just to see how everyone was doing and to catch up with each other. So I think we actually made some really great connections. But while there were a lot of things that went really well, there were a few challenges that I personally faced. So at the start of the minicamp, it was a little bit of a hard transition to be on a video call for 8 hours a day. When the pandemic had hit, my school was doing a mix of synchronous and asynchronous learning. So I was only on a call for about 2 hours a day. So it was a little bit of a hard transition for me, but I think it definitely helped in the long run. I used to never be able to just pick up a phone and call someone. I would prefer to be face-to-face or email or text them. And through this mini camp being virtual, I actually picked up a new skill of like virtual communication. And as can be expected with any virtual program, there were a few technology issues. Some of the laptops didn't have all of the software that we needed for the mini camp, so I missed a little bit of the workshops because I had to be in a call with the tech center to get my laptop all set up. And it was a little harder in a virtual setting because I couldn't just walk up to the help desk and get a loaner laptop. But despite all of that, the tech center was really good at being fast to respond and really efficient in helping out. So moving on to what did I actually learn, or what did I get out of this experience? So the camp was focused on web applications. So we did a review of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Java. But the majority of the camp was focused on React.js and Node.js. We also used the Spring Boot framework and then learned about the RESTful service. And in addition to all of that, we learned how to use and implement source code control with Git and GitLab, as well as the Agile methodology, both of which are not things that high schoolers would normally get to learn. And in a professional aspect, I definitely developed my public speaking skills. During the minicamp, we had a workshop specifically dedicated on getting ready for our final presentations, which really helped a lot. We also had job readiness workshops, such as like how to present ourselves on LinkedIn and in interviews. And being a high schooler who's never had a job before, I was terrified about the interviews. But we did a lot of interview prep and practice in the mini camp, which definitely helped because I was offered an internship position. We also attended workshops on diversity and inclusion, both in and out of the workplace. And all of these aspects helped me grow personally, especially in my confidence. If you'd have asked me before this summer if I wanted to present at a national webinar, I definitely would have shied away from it. And now look, here I am. In addition to that, my network has expanded drastically. Now that I have the confidence in network, I'm able to start a program of my own. So I created an informal organization, Divas in Technology, for STEM-related workshops for middle school girls. And the first program actually started this past Saturday. And I created this because in 8th grade, I participated in the Project CS Girls competition, where I was actually invited to attend the National Gala at Washington, D.C. as an honorable mentions awardee. During this amazing experience, I realized that there were no other participants from Wisconsin, despite Wisconsin having many great school districts and many girls with the skills or talent to participate in such competitions, but there's very little awareness or specific guidance for extracurriculars like Project CS Girls. And since then, I've wanted to create something that would give these middle schoolers guidance and the resources they need to be successful in coding competitions or classes. I started the process at the end of my 9th grade, but I ran into many hurdles. And finally, after connecting with a local university and then now having the network and the skills that I got at Northwestern Mutual, I am actually able to put my vision into action. So being a student of a virtual camp this summer, I could understand and relate to the students and know what went well for me and what didn't. And that helped a lot in planning my own virtual program because I could pull certain things from the mini camp and implement them in my own program. I was also able to ask my instructors and mentors at Northwestern Mutual for feedback on my curriculum, which is something that I wouldn't have been able to do before the mini camp. And overall, the high-tech minicamp was an extremely positive experience for me. It gave me the tools and skills I needed to finally put my dream into action, and it gave me opportunities that I never would have imagined I could have gotten as a junior in high school. And so I'm so grateful to have been part of the virtual high-tech minicamp.
Thank you, Tanya. So clearly this summer, I mean, again, I'm biased, but I think was worth it switching to virtual, as evidenced by Tanya now teaching middle schoolers programming virtual. So I have my email up here for questions. This will be shared out after the webinar as well. And if you have any questions specifically for Tanya, I'll be sure to navigate those her way as well. But thank you for your time. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you both so much. You are, Tanya, exactly why everyone on this call is on this call. That was really enjoyable. Thank you for sharing, Molly, sort of how the program works, the intentions, the objectives, how you pivoted. Tanya, you are a remarkable human being. As I have said, it was truly a pleasure to have you with us today. So thank you both very much. I'm going to share my screen again. And we are going to move on to Verizon. We have with us today Alex Cervello, a manager at corporate social responsibility at Verizon. And he's going to talk with us about the Verizon Innovative Learning Program, which is working to ensure that all children have access to technology and quality STEM education. So Alex, it's all yours.
Hi everyone, I'm just going to share my screen. So thank you all for listening to Verizon Innovative Learning and how we're moving to this virtual first model. I wanted to first give an overview of what Verizon Innovative Learning is before I discuss some of the changes that we've made towards going virtual first in response to COVID-19 closures. So I work within corporate social responsibility and I manage the Verizon Innovative Learning schools. And within corporate social responsibility, we have our new responsible business framework, Citizen Verizon. And Citizen Verizon is Verizon's plan for economic, environmental, and social advancement. Within Citizen Verizon, we categorize our work in 3 different ways, one of which is digital inclusion. We have a goal of reaching 10 million youth by 2030. And one of the key programs that we are using to get to that goal is our Verizon Innovative Learning Schools. So Verizon Innovative Learning Schools, we are currently in 264 around the country, and we've been in them since 2014. This fall, we have added 101 middle schools and 10 high schools, our first ever high schools, in Compton, California, and Irving, Texas. What I'm really excited about in Compton and Irving is that we are actually now in every high school in those districts, and we are in every middle school in Irving, Texas as well. What Verizon Innovative Learning Schools get are each student and teacher receives technology, whether it be a tablet or a Chromebook. And the tablet or Chromebook is also connected to Verizon's LTE network, so they receive up to 4 years of internet access if a student does not have broadband access at home, so they can continue to do work outside of the school building. The devices also receive device insurance, content filtering, and mobile device management software. We understood that just giving schools technology was not going to help solve some issues with technology integrated instruction, so we really made a commitment to professional development as well. So we provide comprehensive ongoing professional development for all faculty, and we also provide all of our districts with a stipend for a dedicated full-time instructional coach. And that coach is actually removed from all classroom responsibilities, and they are solely responsible for managing the Verizon Innovative Learning School program and coaching teachers as they begin to learn how to use one-to-one technology effectively within instruction. We also provide schools with STEM content and curriculum. 2 of our great partners, Project Lead the Way and ST Math, have been continuing to offer content for our schools as they learn how to use the technology effectively in instruction. And additionally, schools can also receive innovation labs where they would have access to emerging technology and 5G access where it's available. And like I mentioned, we are in 264 schools around the country with 111 joining us this fall. If we look at the demographics of our school, we have a very diverse student population. And although we require that schools have at least 65% of their students eligible for free and reduced lunch, we have an average of 82% eligible for free and reduced lunch. So we are going to some schools where there is a significant need for access to technology. So in March, when we began to see that schools were closing due to COVID-19, we had a few big questions that we needed to answer, some more immediate and some more long-term, much like all of you with your programs. The first one was, how do we continue to close the homework gap, but also understand that this homework gap or access to internet at home is no longer just for homework. It's now instructional. If students don't have access at home, they can't engage in just regular instruction, let alone getting access to homework. How do we continue to offer best-in-class professional development to our bills? And how do we make our resources available for all educators who are trying to navigate these new instructional methods? We knew that around the country, schools were beginning to get an influx of a lot of technology, but didn't really have enough time for teachers to have access to that professional development that our bills teachers received on how to use the technology effectively. So to solve for the first issue of the instructional gap, the first thing we did was we tripled the data allowance for all of our Verizon Innovative Learning devices for teachers and students in spring 2020. We repeated that again this fall so that students and teachers can access remote instruction safely from home and feel that they can access all of the same resources that they would like on a regular basis. Additionally, we began to look at our Verizon Innovative Learning model, And we wanted to introduce a new model that would support schools that have gone one-to-one, but cannot support at-home internet access. So beginning this fall, we are introducing a new model for Verizon Innovative Learning in addition to our current one-to-one program. For this program, this would be for any schools that currently have one-to-one device access. We will be providing them with mobile hotspots with up to 4 years of internet access with content filtering for any students without home internet access. Additionally, like I mentioned before, we knew that professional development was a necessity, so we are offering flexible asynchronous options through the teacher training pathways to allow teachers to continue learning about digital learning. We're also providing them with on-site support with a VILS liaison, and we are giving schools access to emerging technologies like our Verizon Innovative Learning Labs and 5G connectivity as well. So this new model for Verizon Innovative Learning is currently available for schools to apply for beginning in fall 2021. For our VILS educators, we also knew that we had to look at how we offer professional development. So prior to COVID-19, a lot of our professional development was in-person, full faculty PD. We obviously needed to move to a virtual offering, but it wasn't just a matter of moving in-person to virtual. We also heard from teachers that they needed flexibility. They wanted access to full webinars. Some of them wanted access to 5-minute PDs where they could learn a quick skill. And some just wanted access to resource libraries where they can read up on their own pace. We also knew that we needed to offer synchronous and asynchronous options, so we offered both of those as well. And we also knew that we needed to shift this cadence that we had around phone calls for coaches, principals, and IT leaders. So what we did was we moved these regional calls that happened on a quarterly basis to national Q&A sessions because we knew that teachers and IT leaders wanted to have access to a broader network since schools around the country were facing the same questions and benefited from hearing from each other how to troubleshoot those issues. So those are resources that we provided for the schools that are currently in Verizon Innovative Learning, but we wanted to make more available to schools outside of our network. And that is where our digital inclusion work with Citizen Verizon comes into play. So if you go to citizenverizon.com/digital inclusion, you will actually see all of the resources that are available to schools there. And I'm gonna go into more detail about each of these. So vilsconnection.org, which is our VILS online community, we actually made some of our resources available to the general public. And some of those resources include content from the New York Times Learning Network. They include different best practices that we have on digital learning and one-to-one device management. And they also include recorded webinars and decks from our Techno Tuesday PD series. Techno Tuesdays was a PD series that we did this summer, where every Tuesday there was a different webinar on things like how do you engage families within digital instruction? How do you engage diverse learners with digital instruction? And all of those webinars are recorded and kept on VILS Connection. We are also repeating that PD series this fall for any teacher that is interested in learning more. We also, this August, premiered our STEM Activity Center. This is a resource that we made in collaboration with Project Lead the Way, and it's available to all educators and also a great resource for parents that are supporting remote learning at home. These are hands-on activities on virtual reality, augmented reality, and a lot of other technologies. And all the activities only require a tablet, phone, or laptop. And like I said, they're very easy to do for remote learning. So we hope that some schools will begin using these with students while they're at home and continue the learning in the classroom. So the STEM Activity Center, like I said, is also linked from the digital inclusion page. And then finally, the professional development has always been a priority for us. One thing that I'm really proud of is this spring, we surveyed our teachers and we asked them about their preparedness for remote learning. Obviously, the goal of Verizon Innovative Learning was not to prepare teachers for fully remote instruction, but we did ask them how prepared they felt. 93% of the teachers who participated in the survey said that because of Verizon Innovative Learning, they were better prepared for remote instruction. And that's not to do with the technology, but that was really to do with the professional development. So this October, this month, we are actually premiering our teacher training pathways. And the teacher training pathways are going to be micro-credential courses for all educators on remote hybrid instruction, instructional technology coaching, and a variety of other topics. So teachers will have the opportunity to earn micro-credentials from Digital Promise, our nonprofit partner, for free. There will also be asynchronous and synchronous learning opportunities for teachers. And over the course of the next few years, we will continue to evolve the course library to include more learning that addresses upcoming issues that we see with digital instruction. Things like learner variability and how we can address the needs of diverse learners. And other pieces around equity in the classroom and how we can manage a remote instructional setting and make it emulate as much as possible an in-person setting. So this will be launching in October, and we are really excited about this. As I mentioned, this is going to be open to the public and open to any educator that's interested. I did not include my contact information in this slideshow, but what I will do is I will put my contact information in the chat. I thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Amy.
Thank you so much, Alex. What really strikes me about all of your work is how comprehensive it is and how you really thought about all of the different angles and issues and challenges that would be faced not only by the students, but ultimately then even by the teachers who are not, typically part of they're not the focus of the work. And something that I heard both you and Molly say when talking about Northwestern Mutual's high tech program is how quickly you responded and how you were able to really pivot and think differently about how you delivered those services. And that is something that is really has been so essential to be successful in this time. So just want to say thank you to you, Alex. And now we are going to hear from our final speaker today. Serena Gallegos is the Engagement Manager for Corporate Social Responsibility in North America for Tata Consultancy Services. And Serena is going to talk to us about two flagship STEM programs at TCS. Go IT, which is a program to support students in using tech for social good. And then their Ignite My Future program, which is actually a pioneering teacher training program. So with that, I will turn it over to Serena. Can't hear you, Serena.
Can you hear now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate it. I'm super excited to be here with you all today. So my name is Serena Gallegos, and I'm an engagement manager for our corporate social responsibility team at Tata Consultancy Services, or TCS. I'm excited to be chatting with you all today, not only about our flagship STEM programs, but also to talk a little bit about a new white paper that we're releasing as a result of some of the work that we've done, because we've also, like all of you, had to go virtual, called Leading in the New Normal. So for those of you who have not connected with us before, Tata Consultancy Services, or TCS, is a global IT services company. I like to tell folks that we are the biggest company you've never heard of, because we're behind the scenes typically. So where you might know many of my colleagues on the consumer side, TCS is typically behind the scenes powering technology across all industries. We have almost 450,000 people working for Tata Consultancy Services around the world, and we're globally headquartered in Mumbai in India. Our corporate social responsibility efforts, much like our business side, are also global in nature. So we primarily focus on education and reskilling, employment and entrepreneurship, but we also focus on basic health and wellness, water, sanitation, and hygiene, thinking through how we can really support our beneficiaries where they're at, and making sure that we're providing a really robust support system for them. And we do this by leveraging what we call the best of TCS. And for us, that not only means our financial means, our intellectual means, our technology means, but also our people. Much like all of you, we know that our people are our lifeline and they're who help make things happen. So we're really, really excited to be chatting with you today. I did want to touch briefly on two of our flagship STEM education programs. The first is called Go IT, which is really our student-facing program. It focuses on leveraging design thinking to really help students explore technology and awareness and really shifting them from becoming just consumers of technology to creators of technology. Typically, this program was run in person by TCS's Go IT team. The model recently shifted about a year or two ago to really think through how we could build the capacity of teachers to be able to deliver this program in school. So think of it as kind of a mini boot camp, 12 to 20 hours of time on task for students, digging into not only design thinking, but really addressing the question, how can we leverage technology for good? And they did that through means of different types of technology, from mobile apps to IoT to artificial intelligence, so really getting their hands onto technology. And much like some of my colleagues on the call have talked about, clearly the digital divide and the gaps that are out there, and I know many of us have worked closely with STEMconnector on, one of the ways we were hoping to address that gap, and we have actively addressed that gap, is by asking students who are typically not at the table for these discussions, students with different backgrounds, women, students of color, closing that gap, making sure that they feel a part of it, making sure that their confidence is growing, their ideas, the considerations that they have, sort of the unintentional bias or sometimes maybe intentional bias that might be in technology that we might have a blind spot to. These students get to address in real time. So we're really proud of the work that they've done. Of course, because of COVID, they had to pivot to go completely virtual, and lots of challenges with that, I'm sure, as you all are familiar with. But the Go IT team has done an amazing job really thinking through what are the means, what are the mechanisms, how do we deliver this in an engaging way while still addressing all the gaps we know are out there in terms of connectivity, access to hardware, where school systems and local governments are starting to pick that up. So I'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. Our Ignite My Future in School program is our teacher-facing program, and it's really about building teacher capacity through pioneering training, leveraging computational thinking. So we're defining computational thinking as technology and creativity and problem solving are all blended into one. And many of you might be familiar with computational thinking, primarily thinking through it from the computer science lens, which of course, as a tech company, IT services, that's what we do too. But what was unique for us is that as we started to look at our HR function and hiring for the future, we really recognized that this was not only a skill set students needed or would be nice to have, it was really required to be resilient against a changing workforce. And so we're really proud of the program that we've created in partnership with Discovery Education, who helps deliver our teacher training. We're leveraging our industry expertise and the technology piece and computational thinking and merging it with Discovery Education's expertise to be able to meet teachers where they're at and provide hands-on PD for them. That program as well was also delivered in person, and we had to pivot to be 100% virtual, again, like many of you. The primary sort of trick with that was figuring out how accurate could we translate that magic that happens in person. I know I've talked to some of my colleagues who have also presented today, and we all kind of shared similar experiences where we all thought we needed to be in person to create some of that magic and that connectivity. We really have no alternative. And so we've had to figure out how to bottle that magic, how to, at the end of every Zoom meeting or Ring Central meeting, people are smiling and are connecting. And I think, the student who was on the call really did a great job of explaining what that looks like, feels like, and sounds like, which is so critical. So we had very similar experiences here as well. Very quickly, I wanted to touch on things that many of you already know. The issue at hand, of course. We know that COVID slide is significant. For those of you in the education space, we all know that we typically talk about students and their summer slide and the reading retention or the gains that they have from one year to the next. I'm also a former teacher, as I know a few folks on this call are. And as a teacher, you expect that at the end of the year, when your students leave off with certain mastery of content or skill sets, you know that when they come back, they might be a little bit rusty. And so you might start them out at a different level just to sort of assess, remind them, refresh their memory, and then pick up and go from there, which is pretty typical. But the COVID slide, we're seeing the retention rates being significant, but also more significantly impacting the lower grades. So when we're thinking about students and connectivity, many of you with children or nieces and nephews, having those younger students sitting in front of a computer, being active, being engaged, that's a tough piece, a tough kind of nut to crack. We also know from a school and economic perspective here in the US, there's over 130,000 schools and nearly all of them were closed in the US. But abroad, from our global perspective, that wasn't necessarily the case. In the UK, we know some schools stayed open for first responders. In other places like India, where we're headquartered, they simply called it a zero academic year. it really, everyone is grappling with what's happened and what's happening to us in different ways. So figuring out how we could recalibrate our program to meet our beneficiaries where they're at, students and teachers, was critical. From an economic perspective, we also know that there are existing estimates pre-COVID that between $460 to $670 billion, there's an economic loss to us because of these achievement gaps. So again, STEMconnector has done some great work on the digital divide. Those 5 reasons for that divide being there. That's the amount of money that the economy is projecting that's being lost because of those existing gaps. And of course, COVID's only exacerbating that. And then the final piece, we know working families are struggling with this. I live in New Jersey where bills and stuff have just been signed to shift kind of the amount of tuition assistance for parents who need to look after childcare or need childcare to be able to return back to work. And then of course, changing HR policies. Many of us on the HR side have had shifts in company policy to be able to accommodate for different medical leave or family leave to be able to take care. So recognizing all of these issues and going virtual were super, super critical. We had 3 key action areas. After we did some research, after we talked to our beneficiaries, our teachers, our students, policymakers, our community and partner members, just like many of you on this call, we recognized that there were 3 critical action areas that we could easily respond to: maximizing student learning, strong support systems, and bridging the digital divide. On the maximizing student learning piece, there were 3 main pieces that we knew we could address. And again, none of these are to say that TCS is doing this independently, but we're doing this in collaboration with many of you on this call, with many other partners who are not. We know we're all in this together, but to do this and to go further and to meet the needs of people who need support, including our own employees, these are recommendations we had for how we could adjust our work to do a better job. So that's what I'm hoping to share with you today. So the first piece is really ensuring that the learning continues. We know that the learning must happen. We know that the COVID slides and summer slides are sort of typical. And whatever means we need to do to get there, that's first and foremost. That's our goal. We want children to learn. We're all concerned about social development, interaction and engagement. I know many of my friends who are parents are having those similar conversations. It's natural. And so the second piece is simply acknowledging the environment that many of our students and our teachers and we all are facing. There's essentially new risks. Times are tough. And so we're talking about mental health. We're talking about economic anxieties. And we know that by 2022, the jobs that are coming into existence because of the changing economy are growing between 15 to 30%, which means other occupations are shifting by as much as 30% downward. So new jobs are replacing old jobs, which means now more than ever, we have to continue this commitment to education to be able to focus on providing access to students of color, women, marginalized groups to be able to have that seat at the table we all know is so critical. Strong support systems, of course, investing in resilience. Many of governments and policymakers are sort of picking up this baton to carry it, thinking through how to make sure that there's funding there. Of course, there's lots of conversations around how efficient that might be, which is a very fair question, but continuing to invest in resilience, which I know many of us on this call are committed to, is critical. For TCS, that meant really pivoting not only our programs, but pivoting our investments to make sure we were meeting the most urgent needs. Continuing to provide upskilling and reskilling. So through our Go IT and Ignite My Future programs, this was mission critical. Shifting to a virtual model, making sure that we were still integrating our core principles and making sure that that was user friendly. Teachers being inundated with free content. That was the thing we heard. No more free stuff, we have plenty. What we actually need is support on how to use this. So providing not just the technology, which is fantastic, and so many of my colleagues on this call, you're making sure that that happens. You've also thought through really efficiently how to support that user side of it, those mini tutorials. When we're running virtual trainings, we've realized we can't just hand out free stuff and say, this is great. We really had to think through demonstrating how it can be used. In fact, we had a school district approach us back in July to say, we would really like to be able to open this up to conversations about how to best use this. And the final piece, the final recommendation around bridging the digital divide is, of course, recognizing and addressing the inequalities that exist. A good friend of mine from teaching days, my nonprofit days, always reminds me that equity isn't a checkbox, it's really an approach. And so I know we all tried to keep that in mind as we're pushing ahead, leveraging multi-stakeholder partnerships, again, what we're all doing on this call today. And then the final piece that we really shifted to is exploring unplugged. What would it look like if we were delivering virtual professional development and student activities or student activations and teacher activations that didn't necessarily require being in front of a screen all day, being on a laptop, being in front of a tablet, even watching kind of a YouTube video or a TED Talk? What would it mean if we got away from that and really went to tactile, kind of hands-on, everyday things that people have access to? That means extending kind of the learnings or the teachings to families as well who are typically disconnected. So we've had a fantastic time kind of digging through that, and a lot of fun building those unplugged activities to think through how we can best support. So my contact information is here. Thank you all so much for your time and listening today. I'll make sure to drop it in the chat. I know in follow-up, they'll be sharing the slides with you all as well, and we're also looking forward to, I believe, in a STEM Daily Blast coming up in the next couple of weeks. We're hoping to be able to release the white paper. So thank you all very much.
Serena, thank you so much for sharing with us. That one thing that's really striking me just from hearing all three of you speak is how comprehensive your approaches are. The extent to which you're thinking about what do all of the players need, where are they at right now, where do they need to go, and really, as I was looking, Serena, as you were talking through your three pillars, I felt, I was really happy to see how the work shared by Alex and the work shared by Molly and Tanya really it all fit together. And that's really, what the STEMconnector approach is all about too, is thinking about how the different players come together to meet needs of, students, teachers, employers at all ages and stages of their trip along the pathways. So I just wanted to say thank you so much. And you said something about TCS specifically, Serena, that I'm going to kind of use, I think, as inspiration going forward. You said that TCS is the largest company that you've never heard of. I want to make STEMconnector the smallest company that everybody's heard of. So that's going to be my goal. But at this point, I want to open up for question and answer. Please use the Q&A function on the screen. One question starting out that I pulled from the chat, Molly, this is for you regarding the Minicamp. How did you, what were the sort of legal considerations, and I realize there are many, but sort of high level legal considerations around engaging with students virtually? What did you have to think about there?
That's a great question. And to be honest, it's probably going to have a different answer depending on what company you ask. So keep that in mind with whoever asked this question, what you're thinking about as well. For the Minicamp, it was actually not too complex because the students that we hire on for the Minicamp, they are brought in as contractors. So we work with a contracting agency that manages a lot of the legality when it comes to even employing minors, getting minor data for things like I mentioned, addresses to ship equipment and so forth. So there was some ease with that. In terms of some of the considerations we took into place, because we're also collecting data and keeping it at Northwestern Mutual, we wanted to make sure that we were very cognizant of the fact that we've never had students' home addresses before. Like that was a big thing I wanted to make sure we could do, that we had parents guardian agreement on and so forth. So we actually have a waiver that we have students use for any event, and we updated it specifically to say, can utilize this for this purposes. We also updated it to say can engage in virtual settings and change some of our verbiage away from just like can take a picture at an event of students to can record a webinar that a student's on. So it was, I would say, because students were hired on through that contracting agency, we had a lot of protections in place, but it was also making sure that our volunteers were protected, we were protected through that legal verbiage. One last thing I'll mention is through our high-tech program, we do virtual outreach now based on school needs. We've been starting to experiment with some of that, and some of the things we're thinking about are, do we host the outreach events on our platform where you have to take, the students' email and their data and whatnot, or do we host it on the school's platform? And as such, we've been trying as much as possible to go to the schools or the nonprofits platform so that we're just opting in as a guest, so we don't add that extra layer of complexity. We've been very cognizant of the fact that a lot of schools don't want a student alone with a volunteer in a breakout room, and that's also in alignment to our belief. We want to make sure that there's a staff member from the school or organization represented in any breakout room, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot to think about. I would say asking the school or nonprofit if you're working with an organization is probably the best way to get as close to best practice as possible, and then partnering with your legal team if you have one to see what considerations your company needs to take.
Thank you, Molly. And I'm going to try to go through the questions and try to and pull out the ones that have sort of the maybe the broadest application. And so questions that don't get answered, we will follow up with, and we will respond to in the follow-up. And then I wanted to ask a question to Tanya, you did mention that there was a participant-only Slack. And so I wanted to just, see how you felt in terms of your peer connections at the end of the program.
Yeah, so so as you mentioned, like we did a lot on on the Slack channel where we could communicate with each other that way. We also, during breakout rooms, we would be able to talk to each other. So we use the breakout rooms as a way to like conduct icebreakers to get to know each other, as well as like working with each other to learn the material. And we also had a group project at the end of the Minicamp. So I feel like I really got to know my group for sure, because we were working together all day for like an entire week. So those are kind of the ways we kind of like connected with each other. We also like did a few random Slack calls. So sometimes during our internship, if we all know like there's going to be, we all have a lunch break from 12 to 1, someone would randomly start a call in the Slack channel, and then whoever is free would just pop on. So it was pretty, we also created like a texting group chat so that we could talk to each other outside of work hours. So those are kind of the ways we connected with each other.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Serene, I have a question for you about some examples of investing in resilience. Can you give us a little bit of information about that?
Yeah, so the approach that we've really taken to investing in resilience was about approaching our teachers and students who we're directly supporting as a whole person. So we knew that as an IT company, what we're really good at when we talk about leveraging our best, it is the technology, it is the know-how, it is kind of those pieces. That's almost, it's not an easy lift, but it's the most accessible one to TCS. So the investments in resilience were really about pushing ourselves to approach teachers and students as whole people. So one of the pieces we drew on was the International Teacher Task Force 2030. I think it's just called Teacher Task Force for short if you look it up. And they're a teacher advocacy group that really focuses on the mental health of teachers, the well-being of them. I personally know tons of teachers who, I'm sure as many of you do, have a ton of anxiety around returning to the classroom and decisions that were being made on their behalf. Everything down to PPE, to communicator masks, to the Lysol and the wipes to clean. For us, investing in resilience meant how could we connect with people, route things. We'll have teacher trainings and they'll reach out to say, do you guys know how I can get access to hand sanitizer? And this, of course, was back in March, April. So for us, investing in resilience was how do we take one thing that seems small off a teacher's plate, off a student's plate, to create an opportunity or environment for them. And for TCS, because what we're best at is the technology piece, we did have to push ourselves to leverage those multi-stakeholder partnerships and think about how we ourselves could be creative and kind of apply the same principles. So that's just one example. I'm sure many of you all are doing it in other ways. Policymakers, advocacy groups are doing a ton of that fantastic work, and we're just trying to we know that that's critical. We're trying to figure out how to play our part to contribute to that.
Thank you so much. We've got just a few more minutes, and so I'm going to give one question to Alex and then one final question to Molly. But so if we can try to keep this to about a minute, your response, Alex. There's a question about the micro-credentials for teachers and the extent to which teachers were actually motivated by this opportunity. And I'll leave it at that because we've only got about a minute for this answer.
Absolutely. So we definitely have seen an increased interest from teachers in earning micro-credentials. And I think something that's important is that micro-credentials are competency-based and backed by a significant amount of research. So we also see interest from district leaders for teachers to actually go through those micro-credential courses over going through other webinars or digital learning professional development that might be out there. So it is a way for it to be credentialed at the end. In terms of the using it towards clock hours for PD, I can't really say that we have that blanket across the country that that's necessarily the case, but it is something that we are looking at to see if teachers can use it towards those PD hours rather than just adding it to their resume.
Great, thank you so much. And then final question, 1 minute to you, Molly, is about volunteers. Could university partners come in and be volunteers? Or where do your volunteers come from, and do you provide training?
Great question. So for the Minicamp, in most of our high-tech efforts, it's Northwestern Mutual volunteers because we want to, take folks we've vetted who are employees and so forth. For the Minicamp in particular, we recruit from folks who have worked with our high-tech program in different areas already. So it's a really intense volunteer commitment. So we don't just take anybody who raises their hand. We really look for folks who have been invested before. For example, the person who led volunteerism this year, he had hired on one of our high school interns last summer, was really connected to the program, and then he activated his whole team. We try as much as possible to make sure volunteers are representative demographically of our students, although that can be tricky. And we do a lot of prep calls, training. It depends on the level of volunteerism. For like our mentorship program that we do culturally responsive training in partnership with Mentor Greater Milwaukee and a bunch of other things as well. In terms of university partners, yes and no. So certain programs, it wouldn't make sense for us to bring in a university partner for volunteerism, but we do invest grant partnerships and kind support into university programs. And we've also brought in university students to mentor some of our high school and middle school partners before. So if anybody's interested in talking more about that or wants more details on how we prep volunteers, feel free to shoot me an email and I'd be happy to talk more.
Thank you so much, Molly. Well, we are at the end of the hour. Want to draw your attention to some additional upcoming What's Working webinars. Email invitations will be going out soon. Next week, we'll have a member showcase of virtual resources. The following week, we're going to do some reflections on virtual summer camps. So I see a question in the chat about lessons learned for supporting, 1 day or shorter camps. That could be really valuable to attend that webinar. And then coming up next month, we're going to do a What's Working webinar on virtual work-based learning experiences. So extended virtual work-based experiences. And then to conclude, thank you to all of our speakers, our members on the call today. Thank you to our guests for joining us. There will be follow-up email next week with the slides, with recording link, speaker contact information. And we really hope that you will continue to join us for these webinars, that you will engage with one another, learn from each other, and again, have a great day, and thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.